To your health. I thought today we could talk about how the Amish saved civilization, because that's what happened the other day, people, with the election, right? Now it's kind of mind blowing, the developments of the last couple of days as far as my life as a farmer go, and our political situation. Because as I mentioned last time, I believe we were talking about enclosure, that we started getting these weird surveys from the Biden administration as soon as they came to power, asking for a survey of how many animals we have, first at first voluntary, but later mandatory. Um, and we're such a small farm, with never. I mean, we had, I think the most we had at one time, we had 3 pigs, 2 cows, 20, 30 chickens, whatever. So not a lot of livestock, but they wanted inventory anyway. And why? Right? It's like in the Bible, right, where David takes his census, and it's like the worst thing you could do, right? Which is, and then, as we know, Hitler took a census to see how many Jews were in the area. So yeah, when they're taking a census, that the next step is not good. But anyway, to go back to the Amish saving civilization, I mean, as I've mentioned before, we live within 15 minutes driving distance from an Amish community over here in Leslie, Michigan. And there's another one about 40 minutes away in Homer, Michigan. And then there's another one, I can't even remember the name of that town. It might be part of Homer, but much farther. Pittsfield, I think, Pittsfield or Pittsford, Michigan, which is a little bit farther away, close to Hillsdale. But there's a lot of Amish around here. And I do a lot of business with the Amish. There's a Amish general store we go to very often. In fact, every Saturday they have the best donuts, which I'm looking for. Maybe I'll go Saturday. But there's also Amish carpenters. I had Amish carpenters put my metal roof on my house a few years ago. And I buy feed from the Amish. I use Amish butchers and poultry processors because their prices are always good and they always do excellent work. And they're good people, and I don't mind supporting good people with my hard-earned money. um, but there's more to it. The Amish, as we all know, are very community-based. They, even though, I mean, I know, like this one Amish carpenter who actually I buy feed from. So they all have 2 businesses or 3. So they have their farming or their gardening, whatever they do. They might raise horses, breed horses. They might raise dogs. They have all kinds of stuff. But they always have 2 or 3 hustles going on. And they always have 9 or 10 or 11 kids, which is always great to see, right? Because they embrace the commandment to flourish, right? To embrace life, right? What is it in Deuteronomy, right? I give you a choice between life and between death. Choose life, that you and your descendants may prosper, or however it goes. So they got the right attitude, these brothers, right? They have the right attitude about our relationship between, and this is interest. I mean, this is super important to me. They have the right attitude about our relationship to the land and to God, right? And all because it's really, if you really think about the idea of stewardship, it's not just to exploit. It's not to exploit at all. The idea of stewardship is to take care of it, right? Which is why when Adam was placed in a garden, right? He was not placed in a wilderness. He was placed in a garden. Because a garden represents the cooperation of the wild and the human, right? You're cultivating it, right? And because of cultivation, we have culture. Because it wasn't until there was cultivation, and in the ancient world, it wasn't until there was cultivation that we could have civilization. And of course there are good things and bad things with that, of course, but and until you have cultivation and culture, you don't have the arts. You don't have time, right? Even though it is true that hunters and gatherers spent far less time working than we do, for sure. Um, but still, if it would be easy to starve in a situation where say there's a drought or something. So cultivation allowed people to have stability, right? And to form communities, and to realize, and this goes back to Aristotle and the politics, right? That you can't live, John Donne, no man is an island. You can't live really in separation from other people. I mean, you might not know them, but you can't live in separation from them. For instance, I mean, I have a lot of talents. I'm not super talented at everything, but I'm not very mechanical. I can do some mechanical stuff, but I'm not super mechanical. I don't have an engineering mindset. So I rely on people who do. For instance, my brother-in-law, who helped reconfigure my fuse box, which is, I couldn't do it, but he knows how to do it. Or a mechanic, an auto mechanic, I have to rely on their expertise. But it's part of a community you build. I have other things that I can contribute to other people. But to go back to the Amish, in this election, the thing is, I mean, what happened? What happened in this election is just, I'm still processing it, because it was such an overwhelming victory for Trump. And I won't say for the Republicans, because I think what happened, probably, I pray, is that this victory destroys both the Republican and Democratic parties as we knew them. Because as we saw, I think part of Trump's victory is because he formed this coalition, or this coalition formed around him with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard and Nicole Shanahan and Elon Musk, of course. So all these people who really are not, their values and political opinions are not identical, but they're close enough where they can work together, which offers me tremendous hope. And part of that, though, was the Amish, because as you probably know, the Amish usually don't vote. They're just like, leave us alone. We don't want to be part of your system, right? We're not paying Social Security. We're taking care of our own people, thank you. I mean, they're really giving an example of how we should actually be living. And actually, they show us how absolutely pathological the way modernity runs is, because it's anti-human and anti-social, ultimately. I mean, one of the Amish carpenters I know makes coffins for the community, right? We don't do that. We cannot outsource our death. But to go back to the Amish again, in this election, they usually don't vote. They don't get involved, right? But they got involved this time, and they did not. And they did last time too, in 2020. But I think because of the media environment, and because of people who are still scared out of their minds from COVID, and kind of, they were all suffering from mass formation from COVID and all the shutdowns and all that stuff, and it was so crazy. The Amish were activated then, but they were super activated this time, especially in Pennsylvania and here in Michigan, and I'm sure other places as well. But these two places I know about. And they voted. It came out and voted. I think, what was the number I saw? 180,000 in Pennsylvania, which certainly flipped the election toward Trump. I don't think there's any question about that. In fact, not only that, whoever it was, they were posting campaign billboards in Pennsylvania Dutch country that were written in Pennsylvania Dutch, which is like, it's kind of a genius move, right? I don't think that's ever been done before. Not at all. Um, and I think what happened in Michigan, where I live, I think two things contributed to Michigan going to Trump. I think one was the Amish, but even more, it was the Muslim communities. In Dearborn, Michigan, they went overwhelmingly for Trump because they also see the handwriting on the wall. For them, mostly it was, I think, I'm assuming, it had a lot to do with Trump's policies of peace, making peace in the Middle East, whereas the Harris campaign and the Biden administration were, they want to perpetuate wars, right? Whether it's in Ukraine or in the West Bank, right, or in Gaza, I should say. They're perpetuating wars. That makes the bad guys richer. So and the bad guys are their funders, and so they work in cahoots with. So they do this, which goes back to the Amish again, because these are people, as we know, of peace. They are nonviolent, right? And so, and then another couple things happened too, right? You saw yesterday. Well, today is Thursday. Thursday. So the day after the election, yesterday, I heard that there was some emergency meeting with the big pharma execs from all of the different big. Like, what are we gonna do? Kennedy's coming for us, right? Sorry, it's funny. So that's one development. The other one was, this was really stunning, that, and I think this is true, that somebody from the Biden administration reached out to Joel Salatin, who is like, the poster child for regenerative farming. He's got Polyface Farm. I can't remember if it's in New York or where is it, but they tapped him to work for the USDA. I mean, I didn't see that one coming. I mean, I'm so glad to hear it. Now, on the other hand, I'm not surprised. Well, I am surprised and I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised because I don't know if you caught it, and I'm sure you can find it on YouTube or even X or social media. Nicole Shanahan put out a video, I think in the beginning of September. And she was doing these really cool little commercials about what the future could be. And the one she did was on regenerative farming. And she actually, one of the people she interviewed for this was a guy named Mark Baker from Baker's Green Acres, which is not too far from here. I've never been there, but my friend of mine's bought pigs from him. And they're talking about the gift of regenerative farming, and which is what the Amish do. It's small scale, highly productive, and that's what we do. It's very small scale, highly productive. In fact, I was just out. Here it is, November 7th. Yeah, November 7th. I'm walking back from the garden. We still have, I bet we have 80 cabbages that are just getting ready right now, and how much daikon. And there's still a lot of stuff out there, and we're not going to eat it all. And our CSA is over, so you need some radicchio or daikon, come on over, right? Or some cabbage. I love cabbage, by the way. But what's interesting to me about all these developments, getting big pharma out of the picture, the idea of getting big pharma out of the, what do you call it, the news business, or some, being able to advertise through television stations and what have you. That is such good news. And I hope that happens swiftly, because it's like they're not in business. They're not in business to make people healthy. they're in business to sell people medicine, right? So this emphasis on regenerative farming, which is in turn an emphasis on health. And this goes back to the Jeffersonian ideal of the United States as a country of yeoman farmers. Okay. I'm going to read you a little quote from Jefferson. It's from a letter, I think, to John Adams. What did he say? Here he goes. Thomas Jefferson, who knew all these things, obviously was thinking of them when he wrote in 1785 that, quote, "It is not too soon to provide by every possible means that as few as possible shall be without a little portion of land. The small landholders are the most precious part of the state." Right? And he's right. Now, of course, we talked before, right, with Bill Gates and China and BlackRock buying up all the farmland. Bastards. That is the exact opposite of what Jefferson was talking about there. And why does Jefferson talk about there? Because, and this even touches on, we talked with before enclosure in England, for instance, that people had a little bit of land, but they had a lot of cooperation, right? And if people get a little bit of land, you can have it's like I said before, it's amazing how much you can grow, but it also, when you have land, generally, you want to take care of it. It goes back to this idea of stewardship. You want to make it better, leave it better than when you found it, which is what we're doing on our farm. I mean, it's a really big part of our ethos here on Stella Matutina Farm. So that it's really an important thing that we let get away from us through the industrialization of farming, right? And as we've seen, and if you see with these Amish communities, is their because of their stewardship of the land and and its small scale, it tightens the bonds of fellowship in those communities. I mean, certainly they still have problems. I mean, one of my friends was Amish. The carpenter put my roof on. I think he had trouble with his community. He said, "Screw it, I'm moving to Indiana." So he went to another Amish community in Indiana, and they do that from time to time. It's just it's human life, right? It's what we do. It's life is messy. It's just how it is. In fact, speaking of life is messy, you might want to watch, if you're interested in poetry. I did a video on Robert Herrick maybe a year or so ago. Robert Herrick, the English Anglican priest from the 17th century, and his book Hesperides is about basically about parish life, but it's messy. It's so disorganized because life is disorganized. These are important things, right? When you live in these, and I hate if I use the word network, it makes it sound like a computer, but we have these almost like somebody commented, I think it's a great observation. It's more like the way mushrooms work with a mycelium, kind of network, if you want to call it, whatever you want to call it. That reaches underground, right? I think it's a great metaphor. We're underground, right? We connect underground, and it is underground. It really is like a resistance movement out here with people doing regenerative farming and agriculture and blacksmithing or whatever else. And here is it really, I mentioned this in the last video, I think on the enclosure one, from E.F. Schumacher, whose classic book, Small is Beautiful, writes this. And this is, if you think about this, if it happens, and I certainly hope it does, the move toward regenerative agriculture on a national scale, the government subsidized big ag or these horrible factory farms, but nobody subsidizes us. Yeah, I could use a little subsidy. Actually, I don't want a subsidy. I want to do it on myself. Just make it an even fair playing field. But in Schumacher's book, Small is Beautiful, here's what he writes. And it's so important about the relationship of ourselves, and even if you're not a farmer, right? Even of the relationship of people to their food and to the land. Here it goes. He says, small-scale operations, no matter how numerous, are always less likely to be harmful to the natural environment than large-scale ones, simply because their individual force is small in relation to the recuperative forces of nature. Right? And that's the truth. I mean, it is absolutely true. As I think I mentioned before, we don't use any chemicals on our farm. We use compost. It's not a chemical, right? We make our own compost from our own manure and plants and egg. You know, I think eggshells and coffee grounds. It's probably the main constituents of our compost pile. But so no chemicals, no pesticides. Um, there are ways to get around all that stuff. In fact, I mentioned the cabbage. I mean, cabbage lopers or cabbage worms are horrible on cabbage, but if you have netting that you can cover the row with, you don't get any, right? So it does, and you're not spraying, right? Because a lot of people are forced to spray stuff on cabbage, but the netting really works wonderfully. But like Schumacher said, that has a, in fact, I would say not only does it not have a negative impact on the land, I think it likewise has a positive impact on the land because it makes it, um, it brings the human being into harmony with nature. And so fundamentally, then, what we're talking about with the Amish saving civilization is um, it's not just a political or economic approach to the way things are or to the living in the world, but it's also profoundly spiritual. And I was quoting the Bible for a reason, right? Um, our relationship to the land and the way we treat it is a spiritual one as well as a material one. Because I'm not a dualist. I don't think spirit and matter are two different things. I think there's a gradation or there are polarities in a way. Yeah, we have a polarity. I'm bipolar. I have spiritual and material, right? But there are both polarities that exist. So we have great in the Rosicrucian emblems from or in alchemical stuff from the 17th century. My doctorate is in that. Is you see these images very often in the works of Robert Flood, where Flood it will have like these two triangles, like there's like one triangle like this, one like this, but they're kind of they intersect. And what happens? The point with this is that so the apex of this triangle pointing up, right, is where God is, right at the top. God's right beyond the top there, so it's the most spiritual. And at the bottom is the most material, right? But it inverts this way. There's another triangle that does the same thing, but this way, where over here it's the top it's the most spiritual, but the bottom it's the least material or least spiritual. But it's still there, right? So there's never one without the other. And in the 16th and 17th century, there was a big debate about pure nature or natura pura, and whether or not anything in creation could be absent the grace of God. And I'm of the no party. But there are a lot of people who thought you could, and actually one of those people was Rene Descartes, who is kind of not single-handedly, but pretty close to single-handedly responsible for us coming to the scientific position that we're disinterested observers of nature, like we're outside of nature, which is BS. Now, and this, and I, but, and this would happen in the 17th century because you also know the 17th century that was going on, but also that was when the scientific revolution started. This over so it's not getting in the sun. But what happened over the course of, I would say, this 16th, 17th century, what happened is not only politically were people divorced from the land through enclosure, for instance, but the church was divorced from the land as well eventually and gradually. I mean, it used to be that in the Catholic Middle Ages that the church year reflected the agricultural year. right? That they intersected in beautiful, beautiful ways. And if you ever want to watch a really cool miniseries about that, there's the BBC miniseries Tudor Monastery Farm, which I know you can find on YouTube. It's like 8 episodes or something, but it's certainly worth watching, and you can see how integrated the lives of people were with both the land and the world of the spirit through the liturgical year. So it's beautiful. And one of my favorite books ever written, it's on my top 5 for sure, is H.J. Massingham's book, The Tree of Life. And he writes about a lot of these things. He was known as a ruralist or agriculturalist. And here's what he says in The Tree of Life. And by the way, if you want to get a copy of The Tree of Life, my publisher, Angelico Press, just came out with a reprint of it. So grab that, because this was a hard book to find. And this is the one book I've written about on my Substack and stuff, or in my books as well. And people would always reach out to me, where can I get that book? I'm like, I don't know. But finally, it fell out of copyright. So John Reese, Angelico Press, jumped on it, because I told him, as soon as that thing's ready, you jump on it. And as soon as it was ready, he jumped on it. But here's what Massingham says. If the British Church had survived, it is possible that the fissure between Christianity and nature, widening through the centuries, would not have cracked the unity of Western man's attitude to the universe. Right? And by the British Church, he means what I would call the Celtic Church. And if you know Celtic spirituality, Celtic Christianity, it is very connected to nature, right, and the creation. And it's interesting in Celtic spirituality. It's the one Christian tradition, I think, that doesn't have a tradition of martyrdom, right? So what you have instead, there's a kind of asceticism there, but it's more connected to nature. In fact, with some of the legends of Saint Bridget, a lot of them have to do with making a dry cow give milk again, or with childbirth, all this stuff about fecundity and fertility, and which is important, right? I mean, that is important, and we treat those things, as I've said recently in a video, we treat those things as a disease. Overpopulation. Oh no, we're gonna die. Or I have to regulate my fertility cycle so I don't get pregnant. Well, no, you don't have to regulate your cycle. Just don't have sex. Because that's how the body's supposed to work. You're supposed to be fertile. that's the whole point, right? Hasn't anybody heard about the biological imperative? No, we've been taught that having babies is bad for the environment, but it's not true. Not true at all. So there was one other thing I wanted to drop on you, because we grew up in it, so we don't necessarily know. We hear about how bad big agriculture is, or industrial farming, or chemical farming, or whatever we call it, and it is bad. But it doesn't have to be. But we also seem to operate under an assumption that it's got to be that way, where there's too many people to feed, which is not true. That's why the Amish saved civilization. But I'm going to read you, actually 100 years ago, this past summer, Rudolf Steiner was asked by, what's the guy's name? I can't remember the guy's name. Count Kaiserlink, to give a course on agriculture, because even then they were seeing the beginnings of the horrible repercussions of chemical farming. And they said, well, Dr. Steiner, we're noticing fertility is going away. Can you help us with this? This is bad. And so he gives this course, which was actually the beginning of biodynamic agriculture, which in 100 years has really grown to be a big deal. But here's what he said in the beginning of one of his lectures, or early part of one of his lectures, about the relationship of human beings to nature, but nature via farming in particular. He said, we must gain new knowledge in order to enter again into the whole nature relationship of these things. Mankind has no other choice. Either we must learn once more in all domains of life, learn from the whole nexus of nature and the universe, or else we must see nature and with all the life of man himself degenerate and die. Right, I'm going to read that again. Or else we must see nature and with all the life of man himself degenerate and die. As in ancient times, it was necessary for men to have knowledge entering into the inwardness of nature. So do we now stand in need of such knowledge once again. And he's absolutely right. And it was 100 years ago, right? Sounded the alarm 100 years ago. But I can't emphasize how important this is. This, and of course, when I say the Amish save civilization, it's kind of hyperbole, but on the other hand, it's not, because now we have an opportunity to move into a healthy direction. I mean, that was one of the slogans of Bobby Kennedy's group when they joined the MAGA movement. It was the MAHA movement, Make America Healthy Again. And it's not that hard. And I'll have to say, just from personal experience. So we started gardening organically when we got married, so 32 years ago. And at the time we were living in the city. And as we eventually moved farther out into the wilderness, we started adding more things. But what happened before we moved to this farm, we were on a farm in Wayne County, Michigan, which is not far from Detroit, but it was, it took a while to get to Detroit. But that farm, we were still on city water. And then we moved here 10 years ago, where we're not on city. We have a well, and we have a very clean well. In fact, our well is so clean that we don't need to put a filter on our water. We don't need softeners or anything. It's super good water. Since then, and not only are we off of city water, we've been drinking raw milk for at least 16 or 17 years. We hardly get sick. I mean, colds once in a while, but not like I used to get. Or, it used to be common for once or twice a year to get a really violent flu. I don't think that's happened maybe once in 10 years we've been here. So, all I attribute it to is clean water and clean food. To talk about making America healthy again, we're making the Martin family healthy again. So I know it works, and I know it's not hard. Now, like Schumacher and Jefferson and Steiner and Massingham all say, right, the small is beautiful. And these small scale operations, now if we met, 30 years ago, when I first heard about community supported agriculture or becoming a member of a farm, there was one in the whole state of Michigan. And I think I mentioned before, now there's at least 7 within 10 miles of us, maybe about 10 or 15. But there could even be more. I always think about this with the 17th century, if we had we could call them the Paracelsian physicians or the Rosicrucian philosophers who did not want to let go of the idea of the microcosm in relationship to the macrocosm, thinking about ourselves as part of nature, not separate from nature and an impartial observer of nature. What would have happened if all the brain power and investment would have gone into that kind of science rather than the industrial model, the broken away from nature model, the disinterested, impartial observer of nature model, which invites exploitation? What would have happened if all that power and investment would have gone into a human-centered science rather than an exploitive science. And I think we saw over the course of the last 5 years, especially with Big Pharma having their emergency meeting yesterday, you know, exploitation has become the end of science in a way. I mean, not all scientists certainly don't go into it to become exploitive, but there is I mean, if it's about making money, you don't want to heal anybody. You need you want return customers, right? So so think about all this stuff, and I think you know if you like what you're seeing, hit the like button. But certainly, as I always say, subscribe, but leave comments. I mean, I think these kinds of conversations are really important to have, and share it with people because I think the more people find out how not hard it is to do these kinds of things. I mean, no, it's not hard. It's subjective, I guess. I mean, there are days when it's hard, but there are days when it's super easy. You know, in the spring, getting ready to plant, I usually work 10 or 12-hour days. But now, you know, I have almost nothing to do out in the farm. So, except for today, I have to get ready to plant some garlic. Um, but yeah, so make some bring some commentary into the conversation. Share with your friends, because I think we could be on the cusp of something really incredible, and I hope we do. All right. So with that, I will bid you adieu, and I will see you next time. God bless.